Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World, and I wanted to take a second to talk about something that popped out in the media recently with Bill Cosby. Bill Cosby has admitted, at least according to the NBC and the Associated Press, in legal documents in 2005, that he'd bought Quaaludes in the past and used those Quaaludes in order to drug women so he could have sex with them. From what I understand, I don't think that the confession necessarily said much about whether this was forced sex or not. But at the same time, I think it's disturbing enough that he would purchase strong prescription drugs with the expectation that he would give the drugs to women in order to get them to have sex. Now, either way, I think that this is damning for Cosby. This doesn't look good for him. I'm sure that there are people that are going to debate the fine points of this about whether or not this clearly proves rape or doesn't prove rape. I think there are people that either hate Cosby or they love him, and they don't necessarily want to see the facts one way or the other. And I think that that's really dangerous thinking, regardless. I've seen people that refuse to listen to any evidence at all about whether or not he may have done this. And I just think that when you get to that point where you worship someone like that and put them on a pedestal, where you think that they're a walking Jesus, you really got to think about how you see the world, and really just realize you're kind of in a vulnerable position, because there are a lot of really powerful people who will know that they control you like that, and they'll take advantage of that. And I think in some cases you could almost say that this is kind of a little bit of what Cosby may have been able to take advantage of, assuming that these allegations hold merit, which, I will say in my heart of hearts, based on everything I've seen, I think there's certainly a lot going on with Cosby that really probably would have landed him in prison if he were a regular guy. I think his wealth and his power protected him. I think that for a very long time, we had a situation where media was not democratized. Media was controlled by a small number of conglomerates, and they were able to collude to protect certain people. Or you can make a call to a couple major networks, make a couple threats, and the story will go away. But now with the internet, everything's kind of spread out. It's very difficult to kind of control and hide certain things if the public wants to know it, if somebody wants to get it out. And I think Cosby, that's kind of led to Cosby's downfall, in addition to his own choices, his own behavior in the past. I know in this case in 2005, where he was accused of drugging a woman so he could fondle her and all these other things. I know that there was a settlement, and now a settlement could mean that you were guilty or that you did something you want to cover up, but a settlement could also mean that you don't want the embarrassment of the trial to go public and all that good stuff. So I'm not even going to say what the settlement meant one way or the other, but I'm going to say that any logical person can sort of look at this trail of evidence when it comes to Cosby and kind of say, okay, this man was doing something that didn't make any sense in his life. Now what I'll say is in terms of what I see, I can give you a couple points of view. I'll give you my analysis of the information, as well as the conversations I have with my daughters. My analysis of the information is that, Cosby, first and foremost, he was almost like a big oak tree that was waiting to be chopped down. I think for many, many years, Cosby was incredibly self-righteous, incredibly arrogant. He disrespected a lot of people who might have critiqued him and things like that. And I think they were kind of waiting for an opportunity to take him down. I think that he kind of felt that he was so powerful that no one could ever screw with him. And I just think those chickens came home to roost when suddenly he became vulnerable, in the media. And the other thing that I observe is that I really see here a case where a married man, at the very least, you had this married man who was not just a serial adulterer on his wife. Now, I'm not, how I talk about adultery and stuff like that. Honestly, I believe it happens a lot more than people talk about. I know a lot of people who claim to have these perfect marriages where you got a whole lot of stuff going on where the public doesn't know, and they haven't told each other. And so a lot of these so-called happy marriages are actually dead marriages, and then some of them end up in divorce. But then some of them are actually happy. So I'm not going to say that doesn't happen either, that you don't have these perfectly faithful marriages that are out there. I know that there are quite a few, but I'm going to say that the complexities of marriage are very, very deep. And I just tell my girls, when we talk about marriage, I just say, look, just make sure you're ready for anything, because you don't know what you're going to get. And I always argue that the definition of the word commitment has really been lost. People define commitment to mean something I'm going to do until it becomes uncomfortable, until I just don't want to do it anymore. Well, really, some would say commitment actually means saying you're going to do something and sticking to it no matter what. no matter what the issues are. And so when you see your grandparents that were married 60, 70 years, understand they were committed to the marriage. Maybe not even to each other, but they were committed to staying married. They've probably gone through things you can't imagine, things that would lead most people to divorce. And for whatever reason, they just said, you know what, we're a family unit. We're going to stay together, and that's it. And so when I saw that, when I see my parents that have been married 40 years, that's what I see. I see commitment. I just see them, driving each other crazy, getting on each other's nerves, making each other mad, but just saying like we're a family. We're almost like siblings. You're not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. You think about Jesse Jackson's wife, same thing. I remember Jesse Jackson's wife when they asked her about all these allegations against her husband. She came back and said, I'm gonna say this one time. She said, "There's only going to be one Mrs. Jackson, and that's it. And don't ask me about it anymore." So long story short. When you talk about the word commitment, I think commitment does mean a lot of times people end up overlooking a lot of things that they didn't expect to happen. It doesn't mean you shouldn't or should overlook it. I'm not telling people what to do one way or the other. But I always tell my girls, if you're going to get married, if you really think you're about that life, just make sure you're ready to be about that life, because marriage is not easy. Anyway, but the thing I saw with Cosby that really bothered me is not only was there this adultery, but there was very consistent adultery. And then on top of that, there was this, man who's in his 40s and 50s and even 60s, still sleeping with women that were young enough to be his granddaughter. I felt like that's a little problematic. I mean, it's one thing if a guy has a coworker that he's close to, or whatever, and they have an affair and kind of mess around or whatever. But when you're sort of consistently sleeping with these women that are 18, 19 years old, and you're 40, 50, 60 years old, that's a little strange. That's a little bit strange. And these girls, that's somebody's daughter. That's somebody's sister. And the other thing that's interesting to me is that, again, I'm not saying this is true in all cases. I'm sure in many cases, maybe the women wanted to sleep with a man like Bill Cosby. After all, he was one of the richest, most powerful celebrities in America. But I would imagine that some of the women that he advanced on weren't looking at him in that capacity. They weren't looking at him as a man who they would sleep with. They were looking at him almost like a father figure, a mentor. So to some extent, some people could say that you jeopardize their trust when she's coming to you for advice and coming to you for an opportunity, and she admires you, and you're trying to possibly give her some drugs and sleep with her. Because Cosby did say, I bought these Quaaludes with the plan of having sex with women. Now, maybe some of the women he gave, took the Quaaludes voluntarily. Maybe some of the women took them involuntarily. That becomes the $1 million question to me. And I haven't seen any evidence to say for sure that everything was totally involuntary, but the odds that everything was completely voluntary, given that you have 20-something people saying that wasn't the case with them, that doesn't look good for Cosby. So when you talk about that, serial cheating, cheating with women, that are young enough to be your granddaughter, women who come to you in a trusting manner, you're not just doing something that some people would say, okay, you're kind of going over the line. This isn't just sort of normal male, sexually assertive behavior. This is going into some sort of pattern, some sort of very devious pattern. And just so you know, you should go look this up. People who, biologists who study the behavior of all mammals, humans included, they say that men who have more testosterone, they tend to be richer, more powerful, even better looking sometimes because they have the chiseled features and muscles and all that women like. But also testosterone does make men more likely to be unfaithful. There's clear data that says men who have high testosterone tend to commit adultery more. They tend to have more sex partners, and then the women want to have sex with them. And it really goes back to the animal kingdom, where in some species you have 5% of the males producing 95% of the offspring. So you have basically among the bears and the lions and the deers, you have these guys who are the Idris Elbas of their species, who get all the women wanting to have sex with them, and the women just, you look at bears and deer, they're not thinking about marriage and all this stuff. The female gets pregnant, runs off with her cubs, and notice on those nature channels, you almost never see the mother and the father and the kids. You see the mother and her cubs. You see the baby mama and her children. That's all you see. So sometimes, when you look at humans, and a lot of the human brain is very similar to the brain of other mammals. We're smarter because we have this stuff in the front, the prefrontal cortex, I think it's called, that makes us make logical decisions and things like that. But your natural brain, the part of your brain that's very instinctual, the part that controls your breathing and things you don't even think about, and your sexual desire and all that, a lot of that's very similar to what animals have. So when you see human beings behaving in certain ways, having a lot of sex or doing whatever, a lot of that does come from Mother Nature. It doesn't mean you can't overcome the wiring, but I think you're kind of a fool to think that you can overcome everything. That part I don't know. It's up to the individual. So anyway, anyway, going back to Cosby, him sort of doing what he did, I had a tough time really being comfortable with just all the stuff that he was allegedly doing while he was married. And then on top of that, you got diseases out here. You possibly bringing diseases home to your wife. And I remember being really disappointed in Kobe Bryant when I heard that he had this unprotected sex with this woman that he just met an hour earlier, even if he didn't rape her. I don't know if he raped her or not. That part I don't know, but it seems to me that there was evidence that they had sex, and I'm thinking this woman has the semen from two or three other guys in her underwear, and you're having unprotected sex with her, and this is 10 years after Magic Johnson caught HIV. I don't even know how a husband could feel if you're coming home bringing diseases from the street back to your wife. I mean, at the very least, again, I'm not saying that I'm not here to judge whether people are good or bad people if they cheat. People get into all that. Honestly, I just gave you my whole Mother Nature explanation, so my thinking is very broad on this. I'm more so seeking truth than more than actually seeking what is right or wrong. I'm not looking for that. But at the same time, what I do tell my girls is I said, look, sometimes you may be in situations where you cheat on him or he cheats on you, but at the very least, you would want to pick a partner who's going to be responsible, so that if they did do something they shouldn't do, because they're going to make most of the decisions when you're not around, at least they're going to think about your health and think about your well-being emotionally and physically when they make those choices. I mean, there's a difference between a person who does something and feels guilty and a person who does something and doesn't feel guilty. There's a difference between somebody who makes one mistake and a person who makes the same mistake over and over and over again, because it's not a mistake, it's actually a plan, a strategy for life. That's kind of the issue here. Now, moving back with Cosby, one last thing I'll say, and I was telling you what I say to my daughters, and my daughter and I, Patrice, we do this thing called daddy-daughter discussions, and actually we're going to talk about the Cosby thing because I want to talk to young women who don't have a father to give them this kind of advice. I would just say that in general, I think that people have to be realistic about the opposite sex. And not just women, but men too. I knew a guy who was spending a lot of years looking for a woman that he considered pure, and he was like 28 years old looking for a wife, and he said he was looking for a pure woman who was a virgin, and and all this stuff, and it wasn't to say that these women don't exist, but I said, I don't know if, first of all, I don't know if there are that many pure women out there, and I think by having such a rigid standard, you might be missing out on a lot of good women. Maybe a woman doesn't have to be pure in order for her to be a decent woman. Maybe you don't want maybe you don't want to marry a porn star or a nymphomaniac, but this idea of purity, I don't know. I think that's kind of one of those cases where religion kind of gets us caught up in trying to aim for something that does not exist. And I think in a lot of our relationships, that's what we do. We look for something that doesn't exist. And what happens is when we find it's not there, when somebody shatters our dream of perfection, we move to the next person because they appear to be perfect. When really all they're doing is they're showing you, they're basically giving you a representation of who they are that's going to fit whatever image you need them to fit in order for them to have sex with you. And then after about 6 and 8 months, you find out they're not perfect, so you move to the next person who seems perfect, and it just becomes this very repetitive process, which I don't know if is necessarily productive for your life or good for your spirit. But then again, I'm not here to judge. It is what it is. But I'll just say with Cosby, I think that we got to look at the information, look at the evidence. It doesn't appear that this guy, it seems like he made some very bad decisions, and it looks like, some of these decisions are going to cost him and his family big. And by the time this is said and done, I wouldn't be surprised if they end up having to pay a lot of money out to a lot of people. It doesn't mean that everybody was innocent. I mean, you did have some things going on here that didn't make any sense. Like, if this man raped you and you're going back to see him over and over and over again, or you're letting him pay your college tuition, or he gave you a job and you're working for him, and you claim he raped you, well, most people who get raped don't want to be around their rapist over and over and over again. So I do think it doesn't mean that it didn't happen. It just means that there are different levels, different varying degrees of trauma, and so to sort of come back after the fact, after you've taken $500,000 from this man after he allegedly assaulted you, I think it's much more difficult to come back and make yourself into the victim, because people are going to say, well, why did you keep taking his money? Why did you keep going to visit him if he assaulted you? Now, of course, there's a lot of nuances, like, oh, well, he controlled her mind, he did this, he did that, but at the same time, we can't deny that people do make choices, and it does seem like there are some choices that are kind of coming back on people, and it is what it is. It's unfortunate that all this happened, and it'll be interesting to see how it evolves. flaws. But personally, once again, I can't say I have a lot of sympathy for Cosby one way or the other. He made his bed. Now he's gonna have to lay in it, and it looks like a messy bed. Well, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World. I'm about to get out of here. And by the way, our Black Wealth Boot Camp starts on July 18th. The first segment. You can sign up at theblackwealthbootcamp.com. Theblackwealthbootcamp.com. That's where we talk about all the strategies of building wealth, understanding money, building business, and all the things that Black people need to know in order to be economically independent and take control of your own economic and social destiny. Well, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World. Please take care. God bless. I'm gone. Peace.